Peace be upon you. Welcome to another calm and quiet night. You're listening to Michael, a place where stories aren't just stories, but a gentle journey, guiding you toward sleep. If your mind feels tired or your heart feels heavy, then just lie down, close your eyes, and allow me, Michael, to take you on a quiet path where every breath is soft, every thought fades away, and sleep slowly begins to arrive. So let's begin tonight's story, only with Michael. This is the story of a young man named Thomas, a gentle, calm soul, full of dreams. He lives alone in a quiet little flat, tucked away at the far northern edge of London. Each morning he takes the metro, the same train, the same seat, the same silence. And each day, he works a quiet job, a job he doesn't hate, but doesn't love either. He types, he nods, he replies to emails, and then he comes home. But inside him, there is something, a whisper, something calling. One day, as he sits on the metro, he feels his head drop back gently, almost drifting, but not quite asleep. The train rocks, the lights flicker, and suddenly, he opens his eyes. The world outside the window is blurred, trees, rooftops, early morning mist, and something in his chest feels different. Was I asleep, he wonders softly, or was I somewhere else? He rubs his eyes and straightens his coat as the train begins to slow. It's just another Monday, but it doesn't feel like just another Monday. He reaches his office, a tall building, simple, quiet, almost invisible. His boss, Louisa, greets him gently. She smiles and says, "Thomas, I've been thinking. I want to send you to Athens to meet the team, to build our bond. They've been working with us for months, but they've never seen a face." For a moment, Thomas doesn't answer, not because he's unsure, but because his heart is already there. He nods slowly, and then smiles. "I'd love to," he says. That night, he calls his mother. Her voice trembles with joy. Her roots are in Greece, just outside Athens. "You'll love it there," she says softly. It's like stepping into a dream. Thomas packs early, days before the flight, folding each shirt with quiet care, his hands moving slowly, as if this was something sacred. And then, on a quiet Friday morning, he locks the door to his flat, steps into the cab, and watches London slowly drift behind. The flight to Athens awaits. And so does something more, something ancient, something silent, something that has waited for him. The airplane cuts softly through the clouds, London now far behind, and below, the scattered lands of Europe, dotted with rivers, forests, and sunlit fields. Thomas sits by the window, his eyes gently tracing the horizon. The sky opens, wide and blue. He closes his eyes and smiles faintly. "I used to dream I could fly," he thinks. "As a boy, I would imagine wings and soaring across fields and oceans." The plane begins to descend, and slowly, Athens appears below. Ancient stone, white rooftops, winding streets, and far in the distance, the shadow of the Acropolis. He steps outside the airport and breathes in the warm Mediterranean air. It smells like olive trees and a hint of sea breeze. He checks into a small guest house, tucked away in an old neighborhood. His room is simple, with white walls, wooden shutters, and a small balcony. He draws the curtains and steps outside. The Acropolis stands in the distance, timeless, silent, watching over the city. He walks, no map, no plan, through narrow alleys, old markets, stone paths wrapped in jasmine. He watches people sit in quiet cafes, sipping coffee, playing chess, laughing softly. He remembers his grandmother, her hands in the kitchen, the smell of tomatoes, herbs, and bread. He feels it again, that longing, that pull, back at the guest house. He stares at the stars from his balcony. The moon is high, and the night is warm. He whispers to the sky, "Maybe I'm meant to be here." The next morning, Thomas sips tea in the soft early light. His mind drifts, and a thought appears. He walks back to his room, unfolds an old paper map of Greece, closes his eyes, and lets his finger float across the map until it lands, a tiny island far away, in the Aegean Sea. Kathas. He opens his eyes and softly says, "That's the one." By afternoon, he books a ferry and finds a long-term guest house on the island. Simple, rural, quiet, just what his heart needs. 3 days later, he boards a ferry under the golden sun. Waves brush against the boat. Seagulls fly beside him, and the sky opens wide with promise. The island appears like a secret, rising slowly from the sea. Low hills, olive groves, and white stone houses. He arrives at a small guest house, owned by a couple named Maria and George. They greet him warmly and show him to his room. It's small, with wooden beams, terracotta floor, and a window that opens to the hills. He sets down his bag and walks out into the wild quiet of the island. No cars, no clocks, just the wind and the sun. He hikes into the hills, step by slow step. Wild herbs grow freely. Sage, oregano, thyme. He brushes his hand through them and breathes in the earthy fragrance. At the top of the hill, he finds a rock and sits, looking out over the sea. A moment of silence, wrapped in wind and endless sky, and something within him whispers again, "Stay." In the days that follow, Thomas slips into a new rhythm, slower, softer, simpler. He wakes with the sun, the golden light stretching across the hills, birdsong filtering through the window. He begins to help Maria and George, tending to the small herb garden, watering, harvesting, gently learning. He asks questions, listens closely, and starts to feel the land speaking back. One afternoon, Maria hands him a basket. "Let's cook," she says. In the kitchen, they move slowly, with no rush, just fresh ingredients and old familiar hands. They wrap rice in vine leaves, chop tomatoes, herbs, garlic, the air filled with scents of earth and oil. Thomas stirs gently, his mind quiet, his heart full. They eat dinner under a grapevine roof. Candles flicker in the breeze, and the stars begin to peek through. Maria smiles. "You cook like someone who listens." And Thomas, for the first time in a long while, feels like he's right where he's supposed to be. That night, Thomas dreams. He is floating, high above the earth, drifting through the stars, wrapped in silence and wonder. He looks down and sees the world as a small blue marble, so distant, and yet so familiar. The moon glows beside him, and the stars blink gently. He whispers into the vast dark, "What a beautiful home we all share." He wakes slowly, eyes opening to soft light and the faint sound of wind through olive trees. He smiles. Later that day, he finds Maria near the garden. He walks over, barefoot on the warm stones, and quietly asks, "Maria, will you teach me more?" She looks up, her eyes kind, and says simply, "It would be my joy." Together, they tend the land, learning the rhythm of planting, of caring, of waiting. Thomas begins to understand that the earth speaks in whispers, and listens best when we slow down, his hands in the soil, his heart growing roots. Every evening, he walks the same path, up the hill, to the same rock, and each time, the sea, the sky, the stars feel more like home. Thomas sat on the balcony that evening. The soft golden light of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose. The air was still. Only the distant sound of cicadas echoed in the warm silence of the island night. He held a small cup of herbal tea, freshly brewed with mint from Maria's garden. As the steam rose gently, he closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. The scent reminded him of childhood, of simpler times, of slow days with no clocks to chase. A soft breeze brushed against his cheeks, carrying with it the earthy scent of olive trees and sea salt. He thought about the weeks that had passed, about how far he had come from the man who once rode the cold London metro in silence. Now he was beginning to hear something deeper, a quiet voice within. That voice whispered not in words, but in gentle feelings, in warmth in his chest, in lightness in his shoulders, in stillness in his thoughts. And slowly, Thomas began to understand. This wasn't just a trip. This was a return, not only to the land of his ancestors, but to the heart of himself. He placed the cup down, stood from the chair, and looked up at the sky. The stars were just beginning to appear. First one, then two, then dozens, scattered across the velvet sky like pieces of a story waiting to be remembered. In that moment, Thomas felt ready. Ready to live not by habit, but by intention. Not by what the world expected, but by what his soul needed. And with that quiet knowing, he stepped back inside, climbed into bed, pulled the light sheet over him, and whispered to the night, "I'm listening now." He closed his eyes and slowly, softly, fell into one of the deepest sleeps of his life. That night, Thomas began to dream. But this dream was different. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt like memory, a memory that wasn't his. And yet, it belonged to him. He stood barefoot in a green field. The grass was soft, dewy, cool against his skin. All around him, olive trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. The sun hadn't risen fully yet, but the sky was glowing, pale gold melting into gentle blue. In front of him stood an old stone house. Its windows were open, and white curtains danced in the wind. From inside came the sound of soft humming. A woman's voice, familiar, warm, ancient. Thomas stepped forward, drawn by something he couldn't explain. He opened the wooden door slowly and saw her, an elderly woman, skin weathered like the land, eyes full of light, hands stirring something on a stove. She turned to him, smiled kindly, and said only this, "Welcome home, my child. It's been a long time." Thomas felt his chest tighten with emotion. He didn't know her name, but somehow he knew her heart. She pointed to a seat at the table, and he sat. There were bowls of fresh herbs laid out, leaves still damp from the morning's harvest. Lavender, thyme, mint, sage. The woman passed him a small bowl and said, "Start here. Touch the leaves, smell them, know them." Thomas did as he was told. He pressed the mint between his fingers. Its scent rose up instantly, refreshing, alive. He inhaled deeply. And for the first time in a long time, he felt fully present. In that dream kitchen, in that timeless space. Something within him rooted itself, not to the ground beneath him, but to a deeper part of himself. The woman leaned over, gently touched his hand, and whispered, "You carry the earth in your hands now. Don't ever forget that." And as she spoke, the dream slowly began to fade. The colors softened. The air grew still. The image of her smile lingered like the last note of a lullaby. And Thomas, still asleep, smiled back. Morning came softly. The first light of dawn tiptoed into Thomas's room, brushing its golden fingers across the wooden floor. The curtains moved gently in the breeze, and outside, the birds began their quiet song. Thomas stirred slowly. His eyes opened, still heavy with sleep. But his heart felt light, as if something had shifted overnight. Something inside him had deepened. He sat up in bed, breathing in the cool morning air. The dream still echoed in his chest. That old woman, her words. "You carry the earth in your hands now." He whispered them to himself, and they settled over him like a soft shawl of comfort. Outside, the village was still quiet. The rooftops glowed with soft orange light, and in the distance the sea shimmered like silk beneath the waking sun. Thomas stepped out onto the balcony with bare feet, the floor cool beneath him. He looked out over the hills, the olive trees, the old winding road that led through the village. It all felt like a painting he had once seen in a dream, now made real. And then, from next door, Maria's voice floated through the air, humming an old folk song, the same melody from his dream. Thomas smiled. It wasn't just a dream. It was a message, a calling, a memory passed through generations, whispered in the quietest of moments. He got dressed slowly, savoring each motion like a small ritual, pulled on his soft linen shirt, washed his face in cool water from a clay jug, and stepped into the day with quiet intention. Maria was outside, crouched in the garden, tending to a bed of herbs. When she saw him, she looked up and said warmly, "Sleep well?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, better than ever. I had a dream." Maria smiled as if she already knew. "They come to us when we need them," she said. "The old ones. They never really leave." Thomas knelt beside her, hands brushing the soil. And for a moment he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them was soft and full, like the soil they worked with. The sun climbed slowly overhead, and a new day began, rooted, peaceful, sacred. The garden was quiet. Only the gentle buzz of bees and the soft rustling of leaves filled the space between Thomas and Maria. The sun, still low in the sky, cast a warm glow over the herbs, the stones, and the worn wooden tools lying nearby. Thomas pressed his fingers into the dark soil. It was soft, cool, alive. He had never really noticed it before, how soil had a scent, a rhythm, a pulse. Maria handed him a small bundle of mint, freshly cut. "Smell," she said. He lifted it to his nose. The fragrance was sharp, sweet, and earthy. It reminded him of summer evenings in childhood, of laughter in kitchens, of something familiar, but long forgotten. Maria stood and dusted her hands. "The garden teaches us everything," she said softly. "Patience, presence, and how to care for something beyond ourselves." Thomas nodded, but he also felt something stir inside him, like a seed breaking open in the dark. As the morning passed, he worked alongside Maria. He learned to harvest rosemary gently, to cut basil with respect, to water not just with hands, but with attention. By midday, They had gathered enough herbs and vegetables for a small meal. Tomatoes, glistening red, zucchini, crisp and green, and soft leaves of oregano, still warm from the sun. Back in the kitchen, Thomas washed the vegetables slowly. Each motion was calm, intentional, like a meditation. He sliced, stirred, seasoned, and as the scents filled the air, something else filled his heart, a quiet joy, not loud or rushing, but still and full. Maria watched him as he cooked and gently said, "You're remembering." Thomas looked up, puzzled. "Remembering what?" She smiled. "What it means to belong, to the land, to your own hands, to the rhythm of life." And in that moment, he understood. This place wasn't just healing him. It was teaching him who he truly was. Not a man behind a desk, not a commuter on a train, but a soul, connected, alive, rooted. And as they sat down to eat together, with the sky bright above and the earth quiet below, Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in years. Home. The table was small, just enough space for 2 plates, a wooden bowl filled with fresh bread, and a little clay dish of olive oil, golden and fragrant. Maria lit a small candle between them. Its flame flickered softly in the early afternoon stillness. No phones, no noise, only the gentle hum of bees outside and the occasional rustle of leaves. Thomas sat quietly. A bowl of warm vegetables rested in front of him. Zucchini, tomatoes, herbs, all gently roasted. The aroma was soothing, earthy, honest. Maria took a bite first, then smiled, slowly, without words. Thomas followed. The first taste was unlike anything he had known in the city. It wasn't just the flavor, it was the energy, the story behind each bite, the soil, the sun, the hands that had tended every leaf. Each mouthful felt like a memory, but not a memory of the past, a memory of what it means to be present. They ate in silence, and it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Sometimes the deepest connection doesn't need sound. Sometimes silence is the language of belonging. Maria poured water into 2 clay cups. The water was cool, fresh from the mountain spring. Thomas drank slowly. The coldness calmed him, like water flowing over warm stones. After the meal, they sat still for a long time, the breeze brushing against their faces, the candle's flame dancing. Time, pausing. Maria finally spoke. "You see now?" she asked gently. Thomas nodded without needing to explain what he saw, because what he saw wasn't just outside him, it was inside. The slowness, the quiet, the return to something real. It was all becoming a part of him now. "The body knows," Maria said softly. "It remembers how to rest, how to breathe, how to feel peace when we allow it." And Thomas realized that this meal, this garden, this silence was not just a pause in his life. It was the beginning of a new one, a quieter, deeper, more rooted life. And in the silence between 2 friends, on a warm afternoon in a quiet mountain village, Thomas felt full, not just with food, but with peace. That evening, as the sun began its quiet descent behind the mountains, a golden hush settled over the village. Everything seemed slower. Even the shadows stretched longer, like the earth itself was sighing after a full, contented day. Thomas sat at a small wooden desk by the window. The same breeze from the garden earlier now whispered through the curtains, carrying the scent of oregano and wood smoke. In front of him lay a simple notebook and a pen that Maria had given him the day before. "Write," she had said, "even if you don't know what to say." And so he did. At first, it was only a few words, his handwriting slow and unsure. But then, like water finding its way through stone, the words began to flow. He wrote to his childhood self, to the boy who used to play in the fields, to the one who used to stare at the sky and dream of flying. "I haven't forgotten you," he whispered as he wrote. "I just got a little lost along the way." Then he wrote to his grandparents, to the gentle hands that stirred pots of tomato sauce, to the voices that laughed over bread and stories. "Thank you for showing me what love tastes like," he wrote. "I'm remembering now." He paused, looking out over the distant hills, the sky now brushed in lavender and soft pink. Then he wrote one final letter to his future self. "Wherever you are, I hope you're still walking slow, still listening to the wind, still planting seeds inside and outside, and still remembering what really matters." When he finished, he closed the notebook gently and rested both hands over its cover. There was a soft stillness in the room, a comfort, like he had just spoken with his soul, and it had smiled back at him. He stood slowly and stepped onto the small balcony. Above him, the stars were beginning to appear, one by one, tiny lights in a velvet sky. Thomas leaned against the wooden railing, letting the night air wash over him. No plans, no noise, just presence. And in that quiet space, between letters, stars, and breath, Thomas felt something shift inside him. Not loud, not sudden, but gentle, like the turning of a page. The next morning arrived, not with noise, but with light. Soft rays of gold slipped quietly through the curtains, touching the floor, the table, and the still open notebook from the night before. Thomas stirred slowly. His body had never felt this rested, not in years, as if the earth itself had tucked him in and whispered him to sleep. He sat up gently, his breath matching the morning stillness. Outside the window, the hills waited, quiet, alive, calling him again. He dressed simply, light shirt, soft trousers, and his worn walking shoes. And without needing to speak a word, he picked up his canvas satchel, filled it with water, and stepped into the day. The path beyond the garden stretched out like a dream, a narrow trail winding between olive trees and wildflowers. His steps were slow, not because he was tired, but because he didn't want to miss anything. Each step was a conversation with the land, the gravel under his feet, the scent of thyme in the air, the distant sound of goat bells echoing through the hills. He passed an old stone wall, half broken, half beautiful. Time had touched it, but not taken it, just like Thomas. Higher and higher he climbed, until the village rooftops disappeared behind him. Only the open hills remained. He reached a wide, flat rock that overlooked the valley. He sat there, legs crossed, eyes soft, breath deep. From here the world felt slow again, right-sized, peaceful. A hawk soared silently overhead. Clouds drifted like floating thoughts. And Thomas, he simply watched the world, without needing to change it. He felt no urge to rush back, no phone, no meetings, no deadlines, just him, and the sky, and the wind through the trees. It was in this silence, with nothing pulling at him, that something inside him spoke again. A soft inner voice, not loud, but true. You're returning, not to a place, but to a way of being. This is who you've always been. And in that stillness, with the hills holding him like an old friend, Thomas closed his eyes and breathed in the beauty of being alive. The sun was leaning westward now, painting the hills in soft amber light. Thomas stood up slowly from the rock, his legs relaxed, his breath steady. He gave one last glance to the sky, a silent thank you, then began the quiet descent back toward the village. The path welcomed him like an old melody, familiar, slow, and soothing. By the time he reached the garden, the air had shifted again, cooler, laced with the scent of basil and lemon. Maria was already in the outdoor kitchen, her hands dusted in flour, kneading dough on a wooden table worn smooth by time. "Back from the wild?" she asked with a smile. Thomas nodded. "The hills are generous." She gestured for him to join her. No need for words, just presence. He washed his hands, rolled up his sleeves, and gently placed his palms on the soft dough. Maria guided him, not with instructions, but with rhythm. "Listen to it," she whispered. "Dough tells you when it's ready." Together they folded, stretched, and pressed, side by side, in silence broken only by the rustle of wind and the quiet hum of the earth preparing for evening. Then came the herbs, fresh oregano, mint from the garden, rosemary just clipped from the path. Their aroma filled the space, fragrant, grounding, alive. They chopped together, carefully, slowly, as if each leaf deserved attention, as if time had forgotten to rush. The filling came next. Olive oil, lemon zest, creamy cheese, a pinch of salt. Maria handed him a spoon. He tasted it. And for a moment, he was 8 years old again, in his grandmother's kitchen, in a different land, but the same feeling. Home. Maria smiled gently. "That's the flavor of roots," she said, "of belonging." They filled the dough, folded it, brushed it with oil, and placed it into the oven. As it baked, the world felt still, warm, and kind. Thomas leaned back in his chair, watching the flames flicker. His thoughts wandered, but not to the city or work or what was next, just to this moment, this table, this food, this new way of being. He was learning that peace wasn't a destination, it was a recipe, one made of silence, earth, and shared bread. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long, sleepy shadows over the village. The scent of baked bread still lingered in the air, along with something deeper, something ancient. That night, Thomas sat alone on the balcony of the guest house. The stars had arrived, soft, quiet, countless. The moon hung low and full, casting a silver glow on the stone walls and olive trees below. A breeze danced across his face, gentle, like the memory of a lullaby. He closed his eyes. And just like that, he was elsewhere, by the sea, with his family, hot chocolate in hand, blankets around their shoulders, their eyes fixed on the night sky, his father pointing to Orion's belt, his mother humming a soft tune, his sister laughing softly beside him. Thomas breathed deeply, letting the memory wrap around him like a warm quilt. Then, a different memory came, one from just days ago, the taste of fresh herbs, Maria's voice, the way the earth had felt beneath his feet on the trail, the joy of doing something slowly, without needing a reason. And then, as if summoned, a voice returned. Soft, soft, gentle, familiar. "Get back to the roots," it said. But this time Thomas didn't resist. He smiled, because he understood now what the voice had meant and what it had always known. He wasn't searching for a place. He was returning to a rhythm, a way of living, a way of being, slow, present, connected. Thomas awoke to the sound of roosters and soft bird song. The hills glowed golden once again. But this morning felt different. It was his final day in Cathos. His suitcase sat by the door, half full, but his heart was fuller than ever. He spent the morning walking, one last slow stroll along the narrow trail, one last breath of thyme and wild mint, one last pause beside the ancient olive tree that had stood through countless seasons. He stopped beside the garden. Maria was picking basil. George was mending a wooden gate. "Leaving?" Maria asked gently. Thomas nodded, but his eyes were soft, not sad. "For now," he said, "but I'm carrying everything with me." She placed a bundle of herbs in his hand, fresh, earthy, a reminder of all he had come to love. They didn't say goodbye, not really, just hugged, smiled, and waved softly as he walked down the stony path toward the waiting taxi. As the car pulled away, Thomas looked out the window. He watched the hills grow smaller, the sky open wider, and in his chest, he carried a quiet promise. He would return, not just to the island, but to the version of himself he had rediscovered here. Back in London, the city was just as he had left it. Tall buildings, buzzing trains, gray skies touched with rain. But Thomas had changed. He no longer rushed. He no longer filled silence with noise. He cooked slowly, walked more, listened more. In the evenings, he lit a candle, cooked fresh food, and remembered the garden, the hills, the moonlight. Soon after, he joined a culinary school, not for fame, but to learn deeply. He wanted to cook food that told stories, that reminded people of the earth and of peace. Then one day, he hosted a dinner under string lights with old friends and new ones. He cooked all day, herbs from a small windowsill garden, bread made from scratch, and a warm dish passed down from Maria. That night, under the London sky, as laughter filled the air and plates were cleaned with smiles, Thomas felt something bloom within him. It was peace. The same peace he had felt in the mountains, the same joy from his childhood, the same call from the stars. He was home, but more than that, he was rooted, alive, whole. And as he lay down that night, eyes soft with sleep, he whispered one last thank you to the trail, to the island, to the voice that had never given up. He closed his eyes, let go of thought, and slipped quietly into a deep, restful sleep where dreams grow like herbs in moonlight. If you fell asleep to this voice, then that was the whole purpose, to make rest easy and the heart lighter. This was Michael. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel so that every night, a new story, a new dream can reach you with peace. Until next time, good night, and may you rest well. Michael, your companion on the path to sleep.